Welcome back, everybody, to the Wrestling with the Faith podcast. My name is Evan. I'm joined, as usual, by Dave, Laurel, and Ben. And we're joined again this week by Pastor Tom. And we are just a group of people wrestling with our faiths and going on a journey together and growing in our faith as Christians. This week, we will be discussing Matthew 21, 23 through 32. The first part of that is the authority of Jesus being questioned. So Jesus entered the temple courts, and while he was teaching, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him. "By what authority are you doing these things?" they asked. "And who gave you this authority?" Jesus replied, "I will ask you one question. If you answer me, I will tell you by what authority I am doing these things. John's baptism, where did it come from? Was it from heaven or of human origin?" They discussed it among themselves and said, "If we say from heaven, he will ask, then why don't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the people, for they all hold that John was a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." Then he said, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." The second portion is the parable of the two sons. What do you think? There was a man who had two sons. He went to the first and said, "Son, go and work today in the vineyard." "I will not," he answered, but later he changed his mind and went. Then the father went to the other son and said the same thing. He answered, "I will, sir," but he did not go. Which of the two did what his father wanted? "The first," they answered. Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you to show you the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him, but the tax collectors and the prostitutes did. And even after you saw this, you did not repent and believe him."
One thing in terms of context, this is the last week of Jesus' life. He's just entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. He's gone to the temple. He's overturned the tables, chased out the money collectors. And so for the next 3 days, he's going to be going back and forth with the chief priests and the elders. And this is kind of one of the first verbal shots across the bow after the whole thing with the money changers. So that's why this conversation has taken place.
So has been surprised at how aggressively Jesus calls out the people of his time, the religious people of his, basically calls them frauds. I mean, I've always thought that was like really intense. And so whenever I think about, Christians of today, including myself, I think, boy, this really kind of says that no matter how much you think you've got it right, maybe you don't.
Yeah, because like it or not, we are the scribes and the Pharisees to anybody outside the church. Whether we intend it or not, that's what they're going to think the church is like.
Yeah, and how good are we at when you're in the church? How good are you at reaching out to those people who are the tax collectors and prostitutes of today, if you will? The people who are, clearly not living a Christian life, but how good are we at kind of reaching out and bringing them in?
Which I feel like in a lot of cases, maybe not as good as we could be. Part of that is I feel like for a lot of people, even just within our congregation, is that kind of puts you out of your comfort zone because you're dealing with people you may not usually deal with, or society says you shouldn't associate with. Yet, those are the ones in Jesus saying, okay, they're the ones that are getting in ahead of you guys. Forget society says. Screw what society says. They're the ones that may be, living more towards that path that Jesus wanted us to, maybe.
And, I think back in those days when they challenge him of whose authority is it, it's all about that, right? It's all about whose authority has control of the then church. And because that's the most powerful thing, that the Jews had during that time, because the Romans controlled all the, non-religious kind of things. So really that was their ability to control other people.
When the Romans really even in some ways controlled religious life, because you didn't become chief priest without Pilate or whoever was the local one being okay with that and probably getting paid some amount of money, for the privilege. It kind of became an inheritance that was passed down over time.
I'm kind of wondering why, when Jesus was asked whose authority, why did he not truthfully answer that? Why did he not say, hey, I'm from my Father, I'm God? Why did he not say that? I don't know.
And was he balancing if you say that you're the Son of God, that's blasphemy, at that point. And so was he balancing that? Was he waiting? I remember, I don't know, was it week 1? I think we talked about maybe that people weren't ready to hear it yet. When he was first talking to his own disciples about who he was, and don't yet. We're getting to that point where he's telling people, this is who I am, but maybe that wasn't the right time.
It might have been that he wanted to wait till Friday before they killed him. And like you said, if he made the claim that nakedly and blatant, the trial starts the moment he goes there. So he's kind of, like you say, doing that real fine balancing act where there's going to be no mistake about authority in the end. But it's
and if you think about the timing, of course he did all this right around Passover, so I'm sure he wanted the timing to be just right.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of builds, like you were saying before, builds from the first episode we did talking about, okay, well, it's kind of hush hush, don't tell anybody. Then you go, I think it was to the second one, our second episode, where well, who's right? We have all these divisions even amongst Christianity, and who's right for that, or who's right, and that kind of comes back to, it's like, well, whose authority is showing, okay, well, which of us is right in these different instances. So I feel like everything's kind of starting to culminate together.
So I have to say, let's cut this into a little offshoot here. Sorry, but I just hate the thought of authority when it comes to the church. When I think about that, I think about the hundreds and hundreds of years that people with the authority of the church abuse their authority and their command over other people. And so that word just sticks to me. Now, maybe because I grew up a Catholic, I don't know, I don't want to blame that, but the history of the church has not been great about people using that authority that they claim came from God to abuse other people and to keep them down and to get money from them, and all the other obnoxious things that happen in human society, but sometimes in the name of God. And
mm-hmm.
So anyway, so this whole idea of authority really I struggle with.
Amen. And so what do you do with that? Because you answer to people, even though you have some level of authority as health commissioner. Others have authority over you, and how do you deal with that? And you can censor your remarks if you want. I don't know if the commissioners are going to be listening or not, but
Yeah, I mean, certainly everyone has a boss, and no one has a boss to some degree, right? You can do whatever you want if you want to, pay the penalty for doing
right.
whatever you want, right? So yeah, so anyone who has any authority in any way, whether it's a parent, whether it's a a school teacher in their classroom, or it's a person who runs a business, or whoever that might be, they all have some amount of the church. I think it looks uglier. I don't know why I think that. Maybe it's, I don't know. I don't know why I think that, but it just seems even uglier.
Well, because the church is supposed to model a different way of living and being and relating, and that's why I kind of go off on the whole partisanship thing that bothers me, in terms of getting in the way of, no, people are supposed to look at us and say, oh, okay, so that's maybe what the good life, or what a decent human being looks like. And boy, do we fail to do that. Yep.
So I guess when I was talking to somebody else regarding the podcast and everything, gave me a couple of questions to use when reflecting on these verses. So I guess the first one, we can kind of see what everybody thinks is, from this passage, what does the passage say about God?
God's more interested in words than actions, or actions and words. Like that's kind of the parable. Ultimately the one who said they were going to do it didn't, and the one who said they weren't going to do it did. So in the end, our actions speak louder, maybe, or they do, but I don't know if that's it.
Yeah, and to me it says that God recognizes the fake people in society, or someone who's abusing their authority, someone who's not being the person that they act like they're being, and God can see it.
I, in some ways, am also that person that abuses my authority and, does not always work for the best interest of others, but seek my own interest. And so it's easy to find those out there who are them people, but
Right.
kind of
Right. It's harder to look in the mirror.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I guess both of them are really kind of saying, as Thomas and we have kind of said, that, yeah, we can look at those parables and think, yeah, people shouldn't be abusing their authority, and we should be true to what our actions are important, but and we can see other people not doing that. But I guess, like Tom was just saying, we need to look at ourselves and just see how we might be doing that and try to improve, and not do that in our lives.
But I mean, as we do that, as we self-reflect, I think it helps us to have a fairer eye of judging the authority of someone else, whether they're abusing it or not. If I know where are my ugly spots, or where do I get tripped up, or where do I really get it right? When I'm aware of that in myself, when I'm looking at, do I respect your authority? What are the kind of things that I'm looking that are going to tell me whether or not you're abusing it, kind of thing. So it's not
I guess it's not just if I disagree. If I disagree with what you say, it's not necessarily you abusing your authority. Maybe it's just, the way that you're doing it. But I think we tend as humans to say, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, or I wouldn't have acted that way, and so therefore that person's doing the wrong thing. When maybe if we kind of looked in the mirror more, we'd be able to kind of see that that's maybe not the case. We'd be able to see it from their point of view, maybe. That's another piece.
And so would there be maybe some good steps that we could take to start working towards that path of, for us, I mean, obviously us personally, but then for anyone, watching or listening, what are maybe some things we can do to help work towards that of self-reflecting and maybe working with somebody else, partnering up with somebody else to kind of help have that accountability of each other. So I guess where I was starting, spitballing is starting like a daily journal where you want to try and keep track of at least one or two actions, that's helping somebody else. And it's the what would Jesus do kind of question of, okay, what's something that is something Jesus would do to help out those around you or those in the community that you can help, and or what are ways that you have helped people, and kind of start keeping track of that. And maybe having somebody else that you partner with during that to make sure that you are, both people are doing something actively in whatever way that may be. The outreach groups or some of the social ministry groups we do through Prince of Peace, or just someone on the street corner and provide a meal to them, kind of thing. Is what are those things that we can do in our day-to-day lives that show God's love?
I think in terms of accountability, sometimes having actual accountability, like to others in the group, like we're saying that we want to become aware of how we're using our authority. And so, when you have a group like this, you have the opportunity to come back in a week later and say, you were talking about struggling with how do I use my authority, or how do I accept the authority of someone else, and trying to do that in an honorable way, and so we can actually be accountable to one another for those things that we're saying that we want to achieve.
So Tom, you're kind of saying, and what you were just saying, Dave, is we can kind of report back to each other how we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, as Christians, we're supposed to encourage and support, and sometimes that encouragement is the little nudge to remind, that, are you really working on that? And I'm just saying in a gracious and kind and self-aware way that we're kind of committed to working on this together.
Well, and talking about, for us, having we're coming back every couple weeks to talk about this, and, we have each other to talk through, is even not just day to day, but even like on a weekly basis, how I remember going through confirmation class and everything, and we were doing the like service Saturdays where we, like, I think it was like the first Saturday every month, we'd go out and do some sort of service event, just as the group of the confirmation class. And I mean, that's one of those things, maybe you get that partner and you set every week, this day every week we're going to go to the men's shelter to help serve food, or one of those things where it is that kind of, we talk about having busy lives, is schedule that time maybe so that you're accountable to both being at some place, and it's not just happenstance maybe, to try and help keep that accountability.
There's one of the proverbs that talks about as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. That that you gather strength from one another as you do these things. Yeah. And I'm sure that there was a gender neutral way to say that, but I wasn't able to think of it at 9:00 at night. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, and I think what happens if you fit something in your schedule that actually helps other people, you end up finding that you not only can fit that in your schedule, but it becomes more of a delight in your day or something where you get away from the monotony of your day-to-day work or whatever it might be that you're doing, and it really brings something, like you look forward to. And but like with every other good habit, getting rid of a bad habit and getting a good habit, it takes a little time and a little repetition before you finally say, hey, this is just really something great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know, like, just as an example of that kind of thing and of being a delight is one of my cousins, actually two now, that live in New York. One of them who's been in New York since college has gone to a soup kitchen to help, serve the community, and like I know that they become the actual volunteers become like a tight knit group and just have a blast, hanging out with each other. But then they also have enjoyed, basically some of the regulars that come through the soup kitchen that are people that are struggling, and you start to build that relationship with them. And then it was another cousin from my other side of the family that moved. They got connected because of, my mom. And they ended up, my other cousin started going, and like, again, it's that you start bringing in more and more people, and it's just that much more fun because you have the people that you're serving with, and then the people that you are serving. That you begin to build that relationship, and you can have that relationship, kind of founded in God's love, and kind of the golden rule of treat others how you want to be treated. How I always try to boil readings down, or if I'm struggling, is love love one another.
Yeah, I when I think about that road, I think about it as the kind of road to love, kind of like what you were saying, Evan, that it really all breaks down to, do you genuinely and your neighbor, and this source of what is that source of love, and where's it coming from? And I think about that, other people act like that and clearly feel that, but then outwardly say in Jesus, and they're not Christians. I struggle. Well, what does that really mean? Maybe they don't know what they believe or don't believe, or maybe I'm wrong, or I don't know. But when I read that parable, that's when I think about when I read that a little bit, is this people who say one thing and do the other, and even people who originally said, "Man, I don't believe in Jesus," but now actually live a life of loving their neighbor and everything that Jesus taught. Do they just not know that? I don't know.
When I have a friend who is a polar opposite of me politically, and we meet in the park once. We try to do it once or twice a month, and just have heart to heart. And our goal is that we want to understand each other. So our discussions begin, help me to understand how you see this or how you understand this. And most of the time we only get as far as, oh, okay, that makes sense. I see how you believe that way. Sometimes we tweak our beliefs, but when I'm with someone who believes differently than myself, I want to just say, help me to understand, how do you see the world then, based on, what motivates you're doing good, and, just, and not in a, I'm right and you're wrong, but just, I'm curious. It helps me rethink, how I'm answering and living those questions.
That makes me think, Dave and Laurel, I know you guys were there, but makes me think of that Camilla Khan documentary we watched at church. Oh, what was that, last fall or something? Oh, what was the name of it? Like
Right.
White Privilege or White Right?
White, right, yeah.
And it's for Ben and Tom, I don't know, and anyone else listening, if you haven't watched it, is this documentary where Camilla Khan is, I think, Middle Eastern descent, but from the UK, and goes to talk to leaders of the KKK that are active in the U.S. and just to sit down and talk about why do they believe what they do, and going through everything of how they hate people of color, of any color, and where does that come from, and her talking through that with them versus where a lot of people are prone to to yelling at one another over something you don't agree, them just sitting down and having that same kind of heart to heart you were talking about, Tom. It gets them kind of rethinking, and I think there's even a couple of cases where just from the conversations that she had with some of these people, like one of them was, I forget the title, like the Grand Wizard or something for the KKK, and he completely renounced it just because of that conversation. Because I think in some of those cases, a lot of the hate kind of stemmed more from fear. I think from their upbringing, they had some sort of fear that was driven into them, in the fact that you get to sit down and just talk and show that you do truly love one another. It can open people up.
Yeah, and she spent a few days with each of them. It wasn't like she just kind of saw them for a little while, and as they got to know her, it's harder to hate someone who's sitting in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to hate a group of people than it is someone who's sitting right in front of you. And so when she talked to them for a while, after she talked to them for a long period of time and got to know them, and they started to become friends, then she read them some of the texts and the emails, that this hate emails she was getting from members of the KKK and other hate groups. And they were that's when they all melted. They all just kind of said, I never would think that about she said, well, but why can you think about someone else that you don't know? Someone sent this. Well, she talked to sent her an email, and she read it back to him and apologized and said, I didn't know who you were. And so that blind hate of people you don't know versus the power of sitting in front of someone and genuinely caring about listening to them, we just don't do enough of, frankly.
Indians won 5-4. Just saying.
4-game sweep.
Yep. Pick up one in the win column and the loss column at the same time too. Doesn't get much better.
Yeah, but talking about the messages and everything, and hating people that you don't know, we talk about how with all this, does this relate back to our lives or the modern era? And I feel like it's very prevalent and easier to voice without as much fear of repercussions or anything in today's day and age with social media. Because you can, I know looking through, sometimes I scroll through Facebook and you see some of the, like I'll see some of the posts from Channel 3 News about something that's happened politically, and just going through the comments, you get people, basically yelling, and it's almost like those emails that Camilla got, where it's just that real hateful kind of talking, but it's like, okay, well, you don't know the other party. And it ends up being, I think, kind of the bipartisan, getting a bit political, the whole bipartisan system, especially in recent years, just drives that kind of almost blind hate, where it's not sitting down and talking and, truly working through things.
Kind of makes you wonder what authority means to the people at the extremes, and it seems like crushing any resistance or disagreement to whoever wields the power, which is really not a very good vision of America for me personally. But, you're right, because we don't, and it's like my teenage daughters, the old putting the worst construction on your opponent and putting the best construction on yourself. And then, no, you can't sit down and talk reasonably and openly with another person when it gets framed that way. All you can do is yell at each other, as my daughters used to do. But that's another whole story for another day.
Yeah, so when I think about that, I think, because people do think their authority comes from wherever. It's, in this case, the internet, many times.
Yeah.
They read something on the internet, and therefore they're an authority on something. So that's really difficult. And so when I look at the passage and it them, the Pharisees kind of looking at who's got the authority to say what, it's really about power. It's really about, if I have the authority, I have the power.
Yes. Yeah, because that's ultimately what authority comes down to, is how do I express the power that is given to me or I possess through title or inheritance, or if I'm God because I did the whole thing. Yeah.
I guess maybe our last question, or something we could wrap up with, that can kind of be the call to action for everybody else, is, from this discussion and from this passage, what's this calling us to do, or to do, to be, to change? What's this calling of us?
Well, I mean, the parable pretty much says it. Being a Christian by voice alone is a little ridiculous, frankly. And so if you're going to say you ought to act like one. So I think that's, and I think, as we discussed earlier, it's easy to say that to someone else, but maybe it's time to look in the mirror every day to make sure that that's not.
Yeah. So kind of, wrapping up our conversation, is take some time to look in the mirror and to find somebody, an accountability partner, like you would in a lot of other things, and see what you can do this week, in the next week, or before our next episode, to work together to help and show God's love to those around you, specifically if it's people that you don't know. So as always, in the comment sections below, if you're watching this on YouTube, or find us on social medias at Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in Westlake, Ohio, and let us know, what some of your thoughts are regarding, our discussion, and what maybe if you have a different take on some of this, or let us know some of the actions, showing that you've had or worked with others. What's something that you've done to help spread God's love? Because as we were saying, actions speak louder than words, and the loudest action is love. So be sure to let us know. let us know what some of your thoughts are, and continue to wrestle with this yourself, with others, and go out there and help start working and wrestling and becoming a better person to those around you. So until next time.